Good morning, I'm Chris Riva. We are following breaking news this hour. This is the final report that has just been issued in the line of duty death of Cincinnati firefighter Daryl Gordon. It has been released about 55 minutes ago. In a couple of seconds, we are waiting to hear more from this panel. It was an independent investigation team that you see here on the left-hand side of your screen that has spent the last year or so reviewing the incident, and the report is going to be released, and they're going to review it here in a few moments in this press conference that you see on the screen. We're expected to hear in the center of the screen right there, that is Cincinnati Fire Chief Richard Braun, and then Matt Alter, who is the president of the Cincinnati Firefighters Local 48. So as Chief Braun is entering his comments now, they have sequenced
On
events.
March 26, 2015,
telling us what they have learned
Cincinnati
from the
Fire
death of
Department
Daryl Gordon. Let's listen in.
Tremendous loss at a fire at 6020 Dahlgren Avenue. We lost FAO Daryl Gordon. Whenever a department has a loss of a firefighter, we like to take that to honor them by doing an exhaustive report on what happened. We look at everything on that day, what everybody was doing, and to make ourselves better. That's how we remember our fallen brothers and sisters, is by not doing the same mistakes over and over again. So it's always a learning prospect. We get the line of duty death reports from around the country, and we study them and we learn from them. This process took over a year to complete this report, and it was headed up by former Assistant Chief Ed Dodowski and District Chief Greg Potter, who is sitting to my left. It took in personnel from Local 48, every bureau in the department, NIOSH, the Cincinnati Police Department, and I want to thank all of them for the great job they did. It's not easy to take a look at yourself and try to find flaws, and that's what we do. Many great things were done that morning. 21 civilians were saved at that fire. But along with that, we look at everything we could have done to do things better and to continue to do things better into the future. With that, I'll turn it over to District Chief Greg Potter to give you a rundown of what is in the report.
Thank you. Like Chief Braun said, the report took over a year to do. There was 26 members of the fire department that participated in putting this report together. This is the final version of what the report looks like. It is made up of 15 different sections and 7 different appendices. And of those appendices, 6 of them are different city reports: the elevator report, the city police homicide report, or fire investigation report, or a couple of them. It's 353 pages long. There's lots of pictures of the building and in the area where the accident actually happened that took Daryl's life. We identified the real problem here that resulted in the accident with Daryl was the failure of the elevator door. The elevator door should not open when the elevator is not on that floor. And we know through the investigation process at that fire that door opened 4 times on the 5th floor, and the elevator was actually on the 2nd floor, leading to an open shaft. We know several times after that, the police homicide team and our own fire investigation team also opened that door. We don't know exactly how many times that was, but they opened it without any kind of force to open it. So that's the main that was the cause of the accident there. That doesn't happen. We're not even sitting here talking about this. Some of the lessons learned that we found to look introspectively at our own department and some of the stuff that happened, we would have looked at anyways, but we wouldn't have had an exhaustive report like this. We would have just went over it, sent it, trained on it and all kinds of stuff like that. So we identified in the lessons learned, just introspectively looking at ourselves, 44 different things that we want to try to improve on. It was divided into 4 sections: operations, communications, training, and fire prevention / fire investigation. When you look through this report, There are several recommendations that we made, and they're made on pages 175 through 218. The majority of them deal with training, that we want to try to increase our training staff to train our guys better. And basically, the main thing I want to talk about there is everything we do, we're making decisions in split seconds. So the information that we get at that time, that might be the right decision. But sometimes when you sit back and look the next day, when you have a lot more information than those people have at that time, you know, there might be a different decision that might have been made if you would have had that information. So it's easy for us to sit here and identify these 44 things after the fact in a lot of those instances. So that's the kind of thing I like to stress. And when I went around talking to the different guys that made the fire, that's one of the things I stressed. You know, like if you do plumbing at your house and something goes wrong, you turn the water off, you got all day to figure out what's wrong. Things go wrong at every fire. Like I said, we're making these decisions in split seconds. So you don't have time to fix the things. So you got to try to do the best you can with the training you have and the muscle memory from that training to stop those chain reactions from occurring. So that's what we want to do. We want to get out and do a lot more training with our guys, build that muscle memory, make us better, and to honor Daryl by doing that. And I promised his wife that's what we do.
About a week and a half ago, we took the report to Mrs. Gordon and went through the report with her. As you can imagine, it was a very trying time for her. It had been a year, and so it was dredging up old memories and emotions, but she was very appreciative for all the work that was done, and that this is the way that we have Daryl live on in the department, because Daryl was all about training. And that is one of the main lessons that we learned, is the training that we need to continue and that we need to improve on. At this time, I'll take any questions that anybody has.
Can you walk us through the process of evaluating and implementing the recommendations? And I saw the number 2.3 million would be the annual cost. I guess that's assuming if all the recommendations were implemented. Can you talk about where that money's going to come from?
Yes, the city has been, the city manager is committed to this process. He's been behind us the whole way. There's an implementation plan, as you'll see, through the budget years 17 and 18. So it's not everything will take place at once. A lot of the things in the report, the recommendations, we've already completed. Through the year, we just haven't waited for this report to come out. As we have found things we needed to do, we've changed a lot of things, and those have already been taken care of. It was an exhaustive amount for the committees to do interviews. NIOSH came in and did interviews, but interviewing everybody that was on the scene, anybody that had any part of it, waiting for investigations to be done, and then to compile all this information and then put it in a sequential order. As you can imagine, we had firefighters on every floor, so what were you doing at this time? Because there's 8 people doing things at that same moment in different areas. So compiling that and to get a picture of what was going on and what was happening is very enlightening to us and helps us with what we do. It was very hard for our department as you go back into our near history. It wasn't that long ago that we were having brownouts. And one of the things that gets cut when you have brownouts, and you're browning out up to 5 pieces of equipment a day, is training. And we've said time and time again in the past, before the brownouts were stopped, that there's a cost to brownouts. It goes beyond what you can see. There's a cost savings with it, but then there's also dangers that go with it. And because one of the things that you can't do as much as you want to is all the training that needs to go on. And firefighters, we have an extensive amount of training that we need to do. We carry 4 and 5 state certifications. All of those certifications require CMEs and CFEs that we need to accomplish. With that, then we have station training, and then we have training where we go down and do live training. So to get all of these into place, and to be doing it working with minimum staffing is quite a task and a chore. One of the things that we came up with, which just came out, and I'll let everyone see this when we're done, but is a quarterly training newsletter. And in here is timelines and different trainings that will go on in that quarter. And this goes out to every station for every firefighter. This was a huge move forward for us to do and to re-implement. But it's things like this and to increase our training staff, which will help us down the road.
What specific changes have been implemented, let's say so far, Chief, in training? I know that the report identifies staffing and forced entry and post-deployment training. What changes have been made in those specific areas?
The biggest changes, not necessarily did we make changes in what we do, it's the training on how to do them. So we started last summer, we went down for in-service training, giving those specifically on hose lays, or what we were looking at to be more proficient at our hose lays. When you're laying hose down, as you go through this report, you'll see some things that happen with the hose getting caught within the stairs, and to be able to react to that and to change. As an example, just several days ago, we had a fire on Shirley, and the hydrant was we laid from the hydrant, and the main broke. Well, now they're there without any water, and there was a fire on the second floor, went into the attic. Well, we adapted to that, and another engine laid from another hydrant from another main to come into it and was taken care of. And these are the type of things that we have to train for because, as Greg said, we work in an environment that is being torn down. And we go into a building, it's deconstructing. And so there's nothing stable in our work environment that we have. So our training has to train us to take all of our knowledge that we have and say, okay, this would have worked 5 minutes ago, it's not going to work now. And how do we adapt to this, and how do we make the changes? And these are the things that we train for. But like I say, we specifically, we worked on hose lays, ladders. Even with our new recruit class, we have extended the times that we're doing with our hose lays and ladder operations to make us more proficient at those.
Communication was another area that was talked about. Human error and radio discipline were perhaps lacking that particular day. The different channels, wrong channels. How did those come about? What's been done to change those?
Almost immediately after then, the way it worked, that came in as an alarm. And on the alarm, we would go to talk group D2. On the way there, it turned into a working fire. And what happened is they changed, which our procedures were, to D6. Well, half the people were on D2 and didn't hear the working fire, so they stayed on D6. And so we had 50% of our people on the wrong talk group. Well, we no longer do that. That stopped almost immediately. Once you go to a talk group, they never take you off of that talk group. We've made those changes. We continue to make those changes as we look at them. One of the things we have that caused a little problem for us here was our auto accidents and extrications, because we're dispatched on a talk group for auto accidents. And then if you have an entrapment, there's a different talk group for that. Well, then we found we had people, some on the auto accident and some on the entrapment. Well, that's being done away with, and everything will be done on an auto accident. Because most of the things, 90% of what you do in an auto accident is face-to-face. You don't use the radio. We're all there in close proximity of each other and do the talking. But we continually look at that. We're making changes. We're changing our radios here in July, which makes it easier to go through our talk groups. So instead of going through there, now they are mini computers, the radios are. And so what we have to do now is go and select and then go down through a talk group. We've gotten it to where we have buttons that we can push. So I can basically, if I start at A1, I can be blindfolded and go to whatever talk group that you want me to.
The report provides a list of the training hours that all of the firefighters involved have had to that point, and there's a rather large discrepancy between the number of hours over the years 2012 to 2015 that firefighter Gordon had versus the firefighter who came across the door initially and made that call. Can you explain why there's such a discrepancy in these numbers?
Yep.
The firefighter that found the door was a rescue technician. Just by the nature of their job, they are training a whole lot more. I think that's actually even spelled out in the report and explains why there is a discrepancy there. That the rescue technicians are part of the training staff as well, They come down and help with training, and so they're training every day. They're on shift just by the nature of the work they do. FAO Gordon was assigned to the rescue company just for that day. He was not a permanently assigned rescue technician.
Chief Ron, I think this is a question for you. You mentioned brownouts a moment ago. Let's go back to that for a second. Is there a suggestion, or did you find any correlation between previous brownouts from years past and firefighter Gordon's death? And with regard to training, and you talked about how brownouts impact training.
Yeah, it's training, like I say, is the core of what we do. We're no different than any other sports team will use. They train and practice and practice and practice. And it'd be like telling Marvin Lewis, well, yeah, your guys miss a lot of tackles, but you don't have time to practice that this week, because you can only practice one day. Well, that's what was hindered on us. We could have things that we needed to do, but strictly we just didn't have the time to do it because, first off, as we go back through those, our crew integrity was shot because we were shipping people all over the city because we were closing, not stations down, but the equipment down. And so that takes away your training as a crew. It takes away your training period as far as being able to do it, because now you're taking more runs and they're further runs. So you're out on the street longer. So you're not back in the stations enough to get the training that you need to do. So it's a direct impact on everything that we do. Like we talk about the radios. I mean, in today's world, communications is everything, and communications as an incident commander, as all of you are here at this table, I mean, that was huge for us. And that's one of the things that we're going to be working on in the future, is breaking down on the talk groups that we have and utilizing our communications to our utmost. So too often we have a major incident and we work off of one talk group. So everybody there, if you have 90 people, they're all working on one talk group. And we need to work on breaking that down. We have those capabilities, and we'll start doing that.
Can you talk about the routine fire mentality that you guys said that a lot of the firefighters had just because they thought it was just a regular kitchen fire? Can you address that and how possibly training could help alleviate that?
That comes from, a lot of that goes back to your officer in charge. I mean, I will throw it on that, because it is very easy to become complacent. If you've got to run to a building, and we have those for a fire alarm, and you go there 2, 3, 4 times a day, after you do that for months and months, it's like, ho-hum, we're going again. And so your level goes down of your awareness of being ready. And then all of a sudden you get there, oh my God, this is actually, they cried wolf so many times, now there is actually something. And so it's up to our officers to keep everybody on every run, at a high level of expectation to go in. And that's hard to do. I mean, it's just human nature.
I was going to say, would you say also that may have caused kind of a lack of communication, everything else to kind of spun with regards to this situation?
It would have helped, yes. I mean, that's everything like that is because that's what you start your base on when you first go. Absolutely.
Chief, on one of the report mentions the word freelancing at one point. On that 5th floor, fire apparatus operator Gordon was separated from his partner. It's always you work in partners too. Was there freelancing going on that floor? Was there freelancing going on elsewhere? How was it? How was the term used in the context of that fire, and what's been changed to eliminate that?
Again, that comes down to the officers and the district chiefs to try to basically keep guys together. As far as Daryl Gordon, I don't necessarily feel like that was freelancing. So to put it in perspective, when the accident happened, the fire was, when Daryl Gordon arrived on the scene, his company arrived on the scene, the fire was out. So the fire was out, but they still had people trapped on upper floors because of the smoke conditions. So they were assigned to go to the 5th floor. The 3 guys that he was with work on the rescue company together every day. And the way we go to work, we all try to stay together. But when you get into smoky conditions, and especially there, they probably let their guard down a little bit, the fire's out. They weren't really thinking there was a high level of danger where they were going. So as they advanced up the steps, well, first of all, let me take you back. As they go into the building, some guys turn their air bottles on at different times. So some guys will turn it on as they put it on their back and get off the truck. Some people, as they get closer to the building, they'll turn it on. On this instance, the 3 guys that worked together, as they got to the building, they turned their air bottles on. They didn't necessarily put their face piece on, so they weren't breathing air yet, but they had their bottles ready to go, and Daryl didn't. So when they were going up to the steps, they got a report of a mother and a child trapped in one of the apartments. So the district chief that was coming up behind them assigned them that duty to go rescue those two individuals. So when they got up between the 4th and the 5th floor, they decided that the smoke conditions were getting bad enough that they needed to put their face pieces on and start breathing air. As that was about ready to occur, another company who had been on the 5th floor heard that radio message and actually rescued the lady and the baby. So they were coming out to the stairs as they were like a half a flight of stairs down. So they went past them, and then they decided to go up, and they were going to finish searching that 5th floor. So the three guys that already had their bottles on, they put their face pieces on as Daryl was putting his face piece on, but Daryl had one more step to do, turning his bottle on. And even though that's probably only took him a few seconds, that was just a few seconds enough to get him a little bit behind those guys as they went onto the floor. So as they go in, again, the conditions aren't really that bad. So two of them go into an apartment to search. They come in out of the stairs, go into an apartment to search. And the other guy and Daryl, he thought Daryl was behind him. They skipped an apartment for some reason, and then they decided to search this other apartment. We think, we don't know because we weren't able to interview Daryl, obviously, that Daryl actually went into that other apartment by himself and searched that apartment. And as they're moving down the hall, they're kind of switching partners again because the fire's out. There's no heat. It's just the description of the smoke conditions were different between all of them. Some of them said that you could see this far. Some people said you could see 5 feet. One guy didn't even have his face piece on. He didn't think the smoke was bad enough that he even needed to be breathing air. So there's differences of what was going on, and each apartment could have been different because if their door was shut, odds are there wasn't very much smoke in that apartment at all that they could actually see, walk around, and everything. So I don't think freelancing was there. I just think they got separated. Daryl missed the communication when they found the door, and when he tried to catch up back to him, he found that door, and it opened, and he accidentally fell in.
Are there any changes that have been made to prevent freelancing per se, okay, maybe he's lagging behind, but wait till he gets behind?
Yeah, we're just getting out, talking to the guys, and we're going to have in-service training, and we're going to go over search techniques and stuff like that, and we'll be highly stressing that. The officers are out stressing it. The district chiefs are out stressing it. You know, that how important it is to stay together, accountability-wise, and that type of stuff, yes.
I'd like to ask about mitigating the threat of the elevator shaft itself. Was a broadcast sent out about the shaft?
No, and I can kind of, our procedure never addressed, our procedure at the time addressed dangerous conditions is basically how it was worded, and a few different things like a building collapse or stuff like that. We're updating that procedure now to identify all kinds of things, holes in the floor, burnout stairs, elevator shafts, so that communication wasn't there. So when the first individual found the shaft, it was a door that swung out, so that kind of alerted him, and him being on a rescue company, they're more experienced at building construction and stuff, that door shouldn't open in if it's an apartment. So he used his tool and found out it was a shaft. So at that time, the rest of his crew showed up there. He thought Daryl was with them, but the smoke, with the smoke, he didn't know, and they talked about it. Then he took a marker out, and he marked on the door, "Do not open elevator shaft." So they thought that everybody could see it. So, go ahead. So as they walked away, they ran into a district chief. They come up, they look in there again. Now this district chief, he was in charge of search and rescue, making sure the building is cleared. So his first thought is, they didn't know there was an elevator in the building. Nobody relayed that information to anybody. So most of these companies are coming from other areas, have never made that run in that building. So they don't know there's an elevator there. So all of a sudden now he notices there's an elevator there. He looks in the shaft, sees the elevator car is right next to the fire apartment. His thought goes to, there could be civilians on that elevator. We need to get down there and get that opened up and make sure they're okay. So again, that discussion's being said. Daryl must have been in an apartment somewhere searching and didn't hear the discussion. So yes.
Are you saying that the people who found the elevator shaft and marked the door were the 3 out of the 4-man crew that included?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
So this happened how long before? That door was marked how long before?
It's an estimation because we just had to use the air, the graph on when Daryl's air stopped being used and that. So it was within 2 minutes of him falling. Well, Daryl fell within 2 minutes of going onto that floor. So it was probably less than that. I would say within a minute.
You talked about some staffing and the fact that he was assigned with a group of people that he wasn't normally with.
Yes.
How did that situation come to be walk us through how that forcing came to be together.
That happens every day because of our staffing, that we move people. We're very fluid with our organization because as people are on vacations or call in sick or on their Kelly day, we have to move people around to fill in. So it's very seldom that you're always with everybody that's assigned to your piece of equipment. You generally always have someone who's being detailed in with you. So that's normal that we deal with. And every fire department's like that. They all deal with that.
That's not something related to staffing, related to brownouts and moving people around.
No, brownouts just exacerbates that. It makes it worse because now you're moving more people. And like with Daryl, there was 3 regulars and Daryl. If we'd had brownouts, there could have been maybe 1 regular and 3 detailed in. It just makes that situation a lot worse.
Was any of the training, the continuing education training that was happening prior to this, how much of that was voluntary versus in-service? I know some of the in-services were cut.
Our state certifications, they're not voluntary. You have to maintain those. We give the classes, we schedule the people. We have some with their EMT that they get in the contract. There's so many hours that they receive over the period of time of overtime to come in and get their training. So those, you have to have your cards in order to stay in the job. You don't maintain your cards, you're not going to be on our job very long. So, but our in-service is more geared to scheduling like we did last year. We scheduled companies to come down. If you're doing it very rigorously and you can bring companies down every hour and a half, run through an evolution, you critique the evolution, bring another crew down. So you generally do that obviously during the good weather. Chief, did you have something you want to address to that?
Yeah, you have to understand there's several different types of training. There's company level training, which the company officer provides every day. And then there's in-service training. We have 841 firefighters to try to get through in-service training. That is a monumental task. For us to do an in-service training can take up to 3 months for us to try to get 60 to 70% of the firefighters. Brownouts incredibly made that much more difficult because we were taking 5 companies right out of the top and not staffing them. So in order for me to bring companies down to training, that's another 4 companies off the line. So that's 9 companies would be taken out of service to do in-service training. So we were unable to do that during brownouts. So that greatly impacted us from conducting in-service training during our staffing issues.
Chief, I was going to ask, what about the history of the brownouts, just for all of us? When was the most recent? That has not been an issue in the last year or 2.
2014, correct?
Yes.
They ended in 2014.
Had those brownouts not happened, do you think this incident would have happened?
I can't say that.
Yep.
Chief, there's talk in there about boosting the first alarm complement response for fires. Right now, it's usually a truck, an engine, and then maybe a squad, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is there talk about boosting it? I know that's talked about in here. And also, it talks about maybe upgrading the equipment for rescue.
Yes, we're looking at that. We're looking at the adding the extra engine. When you look at what the extra engine would do, when we do run into a problem with the hose lay, let's say, one thing with us, once you commit, you're committed, because you just don't turn hose off, drain it and pull it out. You're committed. What a third engine does gives you backup lines, which the second engine can do, but it just gives you another way to go in with the third engine company, and the backup, the companies are already in there to get to the fire.
Let me rephrase the question then a little bit. What's the normal complement for a first alarm? What's the change that's been made perhaps in the wake of the Daryl Gordon death?
So we have right now set up, we have 2 different one alarm complements. So we have what's called a big box for like where the hospitals are, the downtown corridor. So, but the normal one alarm response is you get 2 engine companies, what we call working engines. So they're the ones that take the hose lines in. We get what's called a safety engine, which basically they're in charge of accountability and helping with rat operations if like somebody would go down. You get 2 working ladder trucks with do search and rescue and forcible entry and ventilation. Then you get a rat truck, and the rat truck is basically there just if one of us goes down. They do proactive stuff by opening up doors around the building in case one of us gets trapped. If there's bars on the window, they'll cut those off. They'll throw ladders up if we're working on the 2nd floor in case we have to bail out a window. And then they're there with their equipment. They have to drag us out if possible. So that's the working companies. and a heavy rescue unit. And then you will get 2 district chiefs. One is the incident commander will be the first on the scene. The second one basically helps kind of look at the back of the building, and so you can have a view of all 4 sides. You get a safety officer, which is a safety captain, and he's basically to make sure everything's being done safely. You get a medic unit, which is 2 guys, paramedics, and then you get a ALS supervisor. I think I covered
What has
everything.
changed, though, in that complement?
So in the large box, you get that extra engine for the more special things. The problem is, it'd be the 4th engine, 3rd working engine. The problem is, we do that for places that have been identified like downtown and the hospitals, but we got buildings like Dahlgren all over the city that are special. Takes more than one company basically to advance that first line. So it's hard to identify those and only make those big boxes. So we're trying to make everything the same so everything would be the same complement as what is downtown. And then it kind of makes the job simpler that the 1st and 2nd engine will make sure that first line gets in service. Then that 3rd engine would make sure the backup line comes in. So it kind of makes things just more simple.
How long will it take to implement the rest of the changes, and what kind of support do you need from the city at this time?
Well, the majority of the changes have either been implemented or are in the process of being implemented. The changes where finances come in, because it's staffing, is our biggest problem is right now we're at 812. Our authorized strength is 841 to 850, where we should be. Well, it's hard to throw people at training, which is some of the recommendations, until we get our staffing up, because every time we take someone, it comes from operations. That's where 95% of our people reside, is in operations. We just started a class of 40, and as we start to build, then we can start. That's why there's an implementation period that's built in here. So as our staffing increases, then we can increase with our doing some of the implementations of increasing the training staff.
May I ask, is the union on board with these recommendations, the training? How much input was the able to make these changes, recommendations come to life?
Procedurally, the local has input on any serious injury or line of duty investigation with the Cincinnati Fire Department. So there was 5 members of the Local 48 Safety Committee that were involved with this. Now that the report's out, this is the Cincinnati Fire Department's report. The union will be going back, taking this back to the office, looking at getting with our committee, looking at the recommendations that are being suggested by the report, as well as coming up with our own additional recommendations. I think it can't be said enough. Before I get in that, I have to say this, and I know that the other chief officers here have said it, but we've heard things about freelancing and what happened and what went wrong. Our members, hundreds of times a day, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of times a year, do a fantastic job. Firefighters we're our own harshest critics. So this 353 pages is literally this committee beating ourselves up, saying what can we do differently to ensure this will never happen again. And I'll say this, that if firefighters are the harshest critics, the local is even harsher, because we even take a more stringent look at it. Staffing is one of the biggest components of this. Right now, we have 810 firefighters right now, not including our recruits. We just received notification of 2 more retirements. Over 1/4 of the fire department, about 1/4 of the fire departments in the deferred retirement option program. I think we have close to half the department that is 25 years plus eligible that could, look at it. We have to continue to hire more, and that's to keep our bare minimum staffing. When the company responses that the Chief Braun and Chief Potter spoke about, we're arriving on scene with minimum staffing of 4 people. We're not operating at optimal staffing. The National Fire Protection Association, National Institute of Standards and Technologies, NIOSH, International City Managers Association, a slew of others will tell you 4 is the bare minimum to get the job done. We are not operating at optimal staffing, and that's going to be one of the issues that the local is going to focus on, is we need to make sure that we are arriving with optimal staffing levels so that when we get there on scene, we can get the tasks accomplished to what we need to do. As an example, the fire engine shows up to the scene. You have the driver operating this $400,000 to $700,000 piece of equipment to ensure it's in the right place and in working order. That's the driver's job. The officer's looking at the overall scene. Where are the utilities? How many people are stuck in there? What are they doing? In a situation like Dahlgren, we have people hanging out of this building all over the place, asking for rescue, threatening to jump, doing a number of other activities. We have 1 firefighter on the hydrant. That leaves one firefighter to pull a hand line, get it in service, and do what they need to do. That requires additional companies to do that. Well, additional companies take time to get there. But having the appropriate number of people on those companies, on those first arriving companies, would really help with that, and that's something that we're definitely going to be focusing on. There's a lot of stuff contained in the report, and we are going to do everything in our power to ensure that we get these implemented. As we've always done, Local 48's been a part of the solution, and our hope is that we can work with City Council and the City Manager and the Mayor to do that. This Mayor and the City Manager have been very committed to ending brownouts, and they've done that. And that's definitely a step in the right direction, and our hope is to move forward with this.
One last question then. One of the elements in there is also public education. In this particular case, the person in that apartment trying to put the fire out, they delayed calling 911. The mechanical door on that particular apartment didn't close all the way, allowing the smoke and the fire to get out. Had it been contained, we might have a different story. But the idea of the public education aspect, what is it?
We continue to do public education, try to increase even more. You know, we really push hard for the children. We just had our children's fair in May, 3,500 kids we brought down for that. There needs to be adult education. We just had, believe it or not, even after this, there was we had a fire in an apartment complex, and they got their mattress on fire, so they dragged the mattress out into the lobby. They were going to put it in the elevator and take it downstairs to try to put it out. Well, obviously now the mattress is in the lobby, and the lobby's on fire. So, you know, education is tremendous. We're going to try to do that. We're going to be making some films to be putting on public access to educate the public. But it's a huge thing. Tom?
Are there three things the public needs to know? Three things that the message to get to the public, let's say.
The first is call 911 immediately and get out. You know, just close your door and get out. That is the main thing. The second is to have your smoke detectors in there. It's to give you the awareness. And the third is to be aware of your surroundings. Just like we found out later, if you've seen the report, they knew that door didn't work. Residents there had complained about it. Well, if they would have gotten a hold of the right officials, maybe something could have been taken care of on that. So, but those three remain. But the big one is get out and call 911 and get out so we can get there and get the job done.
We talked a lot about up to the point that FAO Gordon fell. Does the report speak to the process after his fall and discovering him, retrieving him, giving him assistance?
I can't say enough. Chief Laycamp was the one who headed that, and I'll turn it over to him in a second. But as I said early on, there was a lot of brave things that were done that day, that morning. If you would have seen the work that was done by those rescue crews to get Daryl out, it was unbelievable what they did in a short amount of time to retrieve him and get him to the hospital. Our crews are exceptional. As Matt says, we're extremely critical of ourselves because we are one step away from disaster. If we don't do it right the first time, all the time, some bad things happen. And we have the best firefighters in the world in Cincinnati. You've heard me say that time and time again, not only on fires, but their EMS runs and what they do. But I'm going to turn it over to Chief Laycamp to answer your question. But they did just an outstanding job. We had our two rescues, both rescues were there, and they just teamed up and they did an outstanding job.
Once the Mayday went out for Daryl, it was that he was on top of the elevator. We went to the top of the elevator and realized that he had been wedged in between the elevator car and the back wall of the elevator shaft. It had been a space of about 12 inches, and all we had available to us were his boots. At that point, we attempted to raise him from above the car. While that was going on, members were breaching the back wall of the elevator car. From the time of the Mayday to the time Daryl was extracted from that position, he was head down. So we breached the elevator, the back of the elevator car. It was 14 minutes until we had him outside the building. I can't say enough about the rescue effort.
That is Assistant Chief Ed Dodosky, and then sitting next to Cincinnati Fire Chief Richard Braun, as you can see there taking the microphone back there, and along with District Chief Greg Potter. Those two men on the sides of Chief Braun there are the men that were the chairs of a 26-team member investigation unit that looked over the last year into the death of firefighter Daryl Gordon, which happened on March 26 of 2015 when he fell down an elevator shaft in the apartment building that you see here in Madisonville on your screen. The report has been reviewed by Gordon's family. It was emotional for Greg Potter to say that he felt like that the fire department owed it to Gordon's family to not only get a full assessment of what happened that day and in those moments leading up to and after firefighter Gordon's death, but how could the Cincinnati Fire Department learn from the incident and improve themselves upon it. There have been 44 different recommendations. Chief Braun saying much of those recommendations have already been implemented as a result of the death of Gordon and their investigation. It will take approximately $2.3 million annually for some additional training and other things that they would like to do as a result of learning from this investigative team. Tom McKee is our reporter on the scene. Coming up today at noon right here on WCPO TV, Not on Your Side, we'll have the very latest into this 350-page report that was just released today, some little over a year after firefighter Gordon's death as a result of that fire in Madisonville in March of 2015. We'll have more coverage for you today at noon. Thanks for tuning in. We turn now back to The View, which is our scheduled program.